Back in 2020, I visited the Wind River Range for the first time. After hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, my trail family and a few friends were looking for an epic week-long trip, and I'd heard this range in Wyoming was a total hidden gem. The Continental Divide Trail traverses the range, which gave us a straightforward route to follow. When I organized that trip, I had no idea the pull the Wind River Range would have on me, for it now feels like will be the rest of my life. When I learned about the Wind River High Route, I knew I'd be back for it one day, and 4 years later, I finally made this bucket list hike happen. There are two well-known high routes to choose from, Alan Dixon's and Andrew Skurka's. This trip report will follow Andrew Skurka's 97-mile route along the crest of the Wind River Range, which contains 65 miles of off-trail travel, 30,000 feet of elevation gain, 9 passes, and 2 13,000-foot peaks, the range's southern and northernmost named 13ers. The route stays primarily above 10,000 feet and averages 620 feet of vertical change per mile. I read all of this before I started, and still I was surprised at just how beautiful and brutal this 100 miles ended up being. It's the hardest stretch of hiking I've ever done, and tested me more both physically and mentally than I ever have been before. It was also the most fantastic thing I've ever done, and I can already tell it's grown my confidence in myself and in the mountains in ways that will serve me for years to come. Day 1. We drove from Colorado up to Trail Lakes Trailhead just south of Du Bois, and yes, that's how the locals pronounce it. Trail Lakes would be our endpoint, where we would leave my car and catch a shuttle to the southern terminus of the Wind River High Route at Bruce's Bridge. As the shuttle drove away from the trailhead and my Subaru, typical, I know, we had no idea what lay between us and our return. We shared the shuttle with 5 other people. After a 2-hour drive, we were dropped at Bruce's Bridge, and it was time to hike 14 miles of trail to get to what felt like the true start of the route. We climbed gradually into the high country of the winds toward Wind River Peak, the first feature of the route and the southernmost named 13er in the range. The climb up to our first campsite was uneventful. I felt the weight of 8 days of food in my pack, but otherwise, I felt good. The Popoja? I think it might be Popoja Wilderness. We are about 7 miles and 1,600 feet into day 1, and so far it's just been like a steady, slow climb on trail. So pretty chill, a little bit hot, but overall chill, which we expected, which is nice with 8 days of food in our packs. And we rode the shuttle with a few other people, some of which we met prior. Didn't plan this, but it's the person whose sunglasses we found on the Fifner, and then 3 other girls from Seattle, and then Leslie and I. So it's kind of nice knowing there's other folks out here on the high route, so it's not just us completely alone. It provides some reassurance. I'm about 13 miles in to the Wind River High Route, and we plan to camp around 14. This day's been really easy and uneventful so far because it's all been on trail, kind of just getting to the real start of the route, I guess. I mean, this, is the real start, but nothing really all that crazy. Nothing really all that exciting has happened yet. Except we were supposed to have like perfect weather, and there's these super gray clouds, and we've been hearing thunder. No rain, and it's like sunny just to the side of these clouds, but might be a wet night. We set up camp in the last protected site before our ascent and cooked dinner next to the unnamed lake. A lake that Leslie remarked would be a main attraction where they're from in Philly, but out here in the winds is just another unnamed lake. Day 2. In the morning, we knew it was important for us to start early to maximize daylight. We are on day 2 of the Wind River High Route. Left camp at about 6:45 this morning and started our climb up Wind River Peak, which is what we're doing now. Going up should be pretty straightforward, just steep and off trail, and then going down is going to be our first technical feature of the route. It's gonna be a steep, loose gully and some class 3 down climbing with 7 days of food in our packs. So
yeah, should be interesting.
We climbed up and over tundra and rocks and streams. For most of the way, the climb was relatively straightforward, if not a bit of a slog. But we were energized by the views unfolding as we climbed higher and higher. Near the top, we crossed the first of many bands of talus, a theme that you'll notice throughout the route, as well as the first of many snowfields. After the snowfield, we climbed up more talus, with the summit out of sight. At around 10:30, we finally reached the top, but the climb was simply the lead up to the crux of the day, and potentially the entire route, the descent of the West Gully. The West Gully off Wind River Peak is a steep, loose gully filled with medium-sized talus that will shift below you as you descend.
Pretty sure we're going left. I don't know. This is our route. I doubt I will take my camera out again, so that's it. All right. We got it.
It's unnerving due to the size of the talus and the grade of the slope. It feels like if the wrong rock shifts, and they often did, you could easily tumble several hundred feet down the mountain or crush an extremity. There were several times I was certain I'd lose a foot or a finger.
Oof.
It took lots of balance and intentional movement, as well as frequent use of both arms and legs to get down to the first lake below Wind River Peak.
We just came down that. Always not my favorite thing in the world. And we got to somehow get down this way. Going over there, and then somehow getting to the right side of that lake.
We also had a short 100-foot section of Class 3 down climbing, which actually turned out to be the best part of the descent. We both decided we'd take the stable Class 3 rock any day over the loose talus that covered the majority of the gully.
It's 2 p.m. and according to my watch, we've gone 3.5 miles. We knew this part would be one of the most difficult ones. Wind River Peak, we got up and down, almost all the way down. It's been very, very, very tedious. A little bit of Class 3, a lot of loose talus, which has been nerve-wracking, but luckily in a little while we're back on trail, and so I think we'll still get to camp at an okay time. But we have to climb another pass, so that's great.
No surprise here, it was not a little while until we reached trail. We still had quite a bit of talus to cross, and it took much longer than we anticipated. We navigated snowfields and cliffs to get around the lake, only to be greeted by another steep talus field between us and Black Joe Lake, where we might finally join a used trail.
We have been talus hopping for hours, and I hope we're approaching the end. My knees can't take it anymore. Came from up there. All that worse stuff is part of where we came down, like that dark brown rock. We are finally starting to contour around Black Joe Lake, and it's almost 6 p.m. It's taken us 10 hours to go over Wind River Peak and come back down probably like 5 miles. Yeah, and we still need to go over Jackass Pass tonight, so wish us luck.
Black Joe Lake was much larger than we anticipated, and navigating around its shores without a trail did not always go quickly. We climbed up and around cliffs to maintain our forward progress, and the lake went on for what felt like forever. When we finally reached the trail on the north shore of Black Joe Lake, it was 7:30 p.m. Luckily, we had several on-trail miles ahead of us, which we knew had to go more quickly. After a day of talus hopping, I was very grateful for straightforward dirt. We arrived at Big Sandy Lake just as it was starting to get dark. We decided to eat dinner and reassess whether or not we'd be making it to our original campsite over Jackass Pass. After dinner, we ultimately decided to call it a day and tackle the on-trail pass in the morning and potentially take an alternate to save some time. Day 3. We camped at the same spot my group and I had in 2020, which felt very full circle and nostalgic. Leslie saw a porcupine, and we both spotted a bald eagle that morning. These all felt like good omens for the day ahead.
It is Wind River High Route Day 3. We camped at Big Sandy Lake last night. Made it 9 miles in like 13 and a half hours. And I don't feel like we took super long breaks or anything. It was just tough terrain. So we're gonna try and make up some time today and still make it try and make it to our original planned camp for night 3. We potentially have 2 off-trail passes, so we'll see. We might take an alt for one to save some time. We get to go to the Cirque today, and I'm excited.
The climb up Jackass Pass is a straightforward slog. We hoped that it being on trail would help us catch up from the day before. The cool morning temperatures brought the pika out to play, and their adorable squeaks motivated my climbing. As the Cirque came into view, I was flooded with memories of my 2 previous visits. These views are how I fell in love with the winds, and ultimately, how I ended up on this route. It's one of those incredible places that so few people ever get to see, and I feel so lucky to have visited for a 3rd time. Pangora Peak towers over Lonesome Lake, and the intact granite that is so distinct of the Wind River Range holds my attention in ways other mountains just can't. Leslie and I took a short break to gather water, apply sunscreen, and eat snacks before another big climb. We also needed to decide if we would go over New York Pass, the official route, or Texas Pass, which I'd done twice before. I knew Texas Pass was steep, but mostly on trail, which would save us some time that we thought we might need after the endless talus hopping the day before. We decided to take Texas Pass and vowed to come back for New York in the future. I have little concern that I won't make good on that promise to myself. I'll take any excuse to visit the Cirque. While Texas Pass is definitely more straightforward, it's still steep, and prior to my off-trail adventuring, was one of the more difficult passes I'd ever done. But if there's one thing Leslie and I are good at, it's a long, hard, straightforward climb. Once at the top, we started making our way down the steep loose scree and packed dirt toward the lakes at the northern base. We saw more people coming up and down Texas Pass than we did for the rest of the trip combined. We decided to hike a little farther on the CDT before stopping for lunch. We scoped out the other side of New York Pass and confirmed we would indeed be back for it, but we're content with our decision to save time by going over Texas instead. On the way, we met a CDT southbounder who I knew through Backpacker Radio, and I marveled at, once again, how small the thru-hiking community really is. The amount of times I've run into someone I sort of know in the backcountry is pretty wild at this point. After lunch, we made our way to the next off-trail section. We departed from Skull Lake and made our way along the East Fork River. As the hours passed, I became more and more pessimistic about our ability to get over Raid Peak Pass that day. I didn't take many videos, honestly, because I was in a sour mood, questioning whether I was actually capable of completing this route. But as we climbed up the East Fork Valley, we found a use trail, which turned things around, and the views were phenomenal. As we approached the base of Raid Peak Pass, it was time to make another decision. Would we go up and over tonight or wait until morning, putting ourselves behind schedule once again? Ultimately, we were both exhausted, and we knew a night of sleep would make us quicker. We also didn't really know what the other side of the pass held and didn't feel comfortable taking it on in the dark. A big part of doing a route is embracing the fact that things might take you twice as long as you think they will, and we didn't really want to find out what those things were like by our headlamps. So we found a big rock that we hoped would act as a wind block and set up camp early. We were embracing the extra sleep we figured we'd get, and the campsite wasn't half bad either. Despite our efforts to find a wind block, the wind whipped through our tents all night. Luckily, we both had our earplugs, which kept the noise to a minimum and definitely improved our sleep. Day 4. We decided to get moving early once again in hopes of catching up to our original itinerary. That would mean going over 3 passes, Raid Peak, Sentry Peak, and Photo, in one day. We ascended Raid Peak Pass first, covering tundra, then talus, then granite slabs and snow. We knew we could stay high and wide to remain on more straightforward terrain, or go straight up for a more direct route that involved scrambling. As we approached, we surprised ourselves by deciding to go directly up the middle. I'm not sure if it was poor route finding, but we eventually found ourselves on a slab of granite with a crack up the middle. And a little ways into going up it, I turned around and said to Leslie, "Is this stupid?" And they said, "If you can go for it, go for it." So we did.
All this morning and said, "Let's fucking send it." And there was a version that said no scrambling.
And we said that's out of the way.
And here we are, climbing a crack up a slab with the fucking lake behind us.
And a full pack.
And a full pack. And 5 days of food.
As we continued to climb, I figured snowfields would be faster than talus hopping, so I began to follow what I thought were someone else's footprints.
Check out these prints in the snow. Don't know. They got claws, which I think means not a cat, right?
Turned out they were not footprints, but paw prints. Often, animals know best anyway, and the route seemed reasonable, although we were happy to have microspikes on the hard morning snow because, unlike our animal friend, we didn't have claws for traction. I surprised myself with my comfort on the snow, something I've tended to avoid in recent years. I felt like I was getting a little bit of my original PCT spirit back. The fear and anxiety I've had around riskier mountain adventures was slowly starting to dissipate and be replaced with confidence in my own abilities and experience.
This is hopefully Raid Peak Pass. It's been a journey so far. How are you feeling, Leslie?
Feeling energized.
Sweet. Let's keep that going all day.
2 more passes.
Those are supposed to be walk up, walk down though.
Leslie and I hopped over more talus, the resounding theme of the Wind River High Route, and made our way to the summit of Raid Peak Pass. Our descent from Raid Peak involved, you guessed it, more talus, and a little bit of Class 3 down climbing. Leslie is a climber, so I typically defer to them to lead us down any of the Class 3 sections, and they do an excellent job picking routes.
Getting ready for our Class 3 descent. Somewhere down there. Not really sure yet. Tighten the shoes though.
We started to really embrace the Class 3 sections, especially since they were almost always on solid rock. Feels a lot better, honestly, than rock hopping over endless talus, even if that endless talus is only Class 2.
That is where we came from. All those rocks. And that dip over there is where we're going.
We picked our way toward Bonneville Lake, gathered water, and took a short break on the shore. Although we took breaks on this route, it felt like every break was for a productive or logistical purpose. We were either filtering or treating water, shoveling food in our mouths, or performing some other task that would ultimately ensure that we could keep going. There were no breaks that I can remember that were simply sitting and relaxing. We just didn't have time for that. As we made our way through the talus on the shores of Bonneville Lake, we noticed another human, moving much faster, coming toward us. It turned out to be the women's unsupported FKT record holder, out on the route in an attempt to beat her own time of 59 hours and cut it down to 54. We were both totally blown away. It was taking everything in us to complete this route over 7+ days, and Kelly was out here shooting for just 2.5. It inspired us to keep moving, and inspired us for much of the rest of the route. From the top of Century Peak Pass, we could see Photo Pass, our final challenge of the day. I didn't look too far away, but it's daunting knowing the kind of terrain that sits between you and another hard climb.
We can see Photo Pass in the distance there, in line with the lakes, where that little patch of snow is. Woohoo! That's where we're going. 4.5 miles that way. And just shoe skiing down all of that to the left. Maybe not my smartest decision, but it worked out.
After a quick lunch below Century Peak Pass, we started making our way across the Middle Fork Valley. We side-hilled along Lee and Bumark Lakes, attempting to avoid as much of the willows as possible. While use and elk trails popped up on occasion, it was mostly an off-trail adventure to reach the base of Photo Pass. Another theme of the Wind River High Route is that getting to the base of the pass usually involves as much or more challenge as getting to the top. You almost always have to ascend to a hanging valley before you even get to the base. Before reaching the base of Photo Pass, we ascended a steep hill, following the line of a waterfall and again attempting to avoid the willows. These ascents are often so steep they seem flat out ridiculous, but like I said, Leslie and I are pretty good at an uphill slog. This struggle of an ascent earned us a straightforward walk on tundra up to the top of Photo Pass. From there, we looked back on where we came, all the way to Century Peak Pass. We'd successfully made it over all 3 passes, our goal for the day, but I knew better than to get ahead of myself as the descent and a good bit of route finding still separated us from camp. The descent turned out to be what Leslie and I both dubbed among our least favorite terrain: loose scree and small gravel over hard-packed dirt. It's a perfect recipe for some unintended butt scoots. These descents require a lot of knee strain to stay upright and are often incredibly slow.
Can't see it, but that's Photo Pass up there somewhere. Fuck that descent.
We did eventually reach flatter, easier ground, and navigation became the primary issue. We walked through fields of elk poop, prints, and wallows before fording the South Fork of Bull Lake Creek. From there, we followed elk trails and cairns, forgetting that we were also supposed to be using a sometimes dry, seasonal creek as a handrail. We kept accidentally following different creeks, which we were warned about in the guide, but had forgotten to refresh ourselves in the exhaustion of the day. After some slow and frustrating navigation through the trees, we finally emerged to our planned site beside another unnamed lake. We were finally caught up to our original itinerary, and I was absolutely exhausted. I was worried I couldn't keep it up, and worried that our bailout options were limited. Leslie reassured me that we did indeed have options, and we would assess them as they came. We just needed to keep moving forward. Day 5.
The Wind River High Route has claimed Leslie's trekking pole.
Oh, yeah.
Officially yesterday, but it got worse this morning. They're working with just the tip, basically. Yeah, Wind River High Route Day 5. I don't think I even made a video yesterday. We did three passes. Reed Peak Pass, Sentry Peak Pass, and Photo Pass. Photo Pass was supposed to be chill. The descent was not. No. Well, it was chill in the sense that it was fine, but it fucking hurt our knees and took forever. And today we've got a really big day, and I don't know. I have faith in us. I'm just feeling a lack of calories in 4 days of brutal hiking, and just knowing there's 4 more is a lot right now. But weather is and has been fantastic, so don't say that. I know I've avoided saying it for the past 4 days, but we've got a forecast until tomorrow at least. I think that pointy rock right there is Europe Peak. And I think that's why he said it, like the walk up looks fine. The climb up doesn't look bad. Maybe, I don't know, I can't tell.
We climbed snow, talus, and tundra toward Europe Peak and assessed our route up. As we approached the base of the Class 3 section, the route became obvious and actually looked pretty fun. I let Leslie take the lead on the climb once again, trusting their climbing expertise to get us up safely.
We're getting there. Let's just like get through it and like start descending, and we were like, wait, where was it? No, I don't think that's gonna be the case.
As we were climbing, I reflected on the fact that just a year ago, descriptions of Class 3 sections would scare me away from features. I would honestly hope for weather, so we had a valid excuse to go around these more intimidating sections. Now I was approaching them, ready to go, and even, quite frankly, enjoying myself. The tone on this trip was shifting from overwhelm to optimism and confidence that we just needed to get there in order to figure it out. We no longer looked at features in the distance with fear, but rather looked at them, laughed, commented on how ridiculous they looked, and figured we'd find out just how ridiculous they actually were once we got closer. We no longer let them intimidate us from afar. We joked about Skurka being a madman for looking at these features and deciding, yeah, that could be the way, and then laughed at ourselves for deciding to follow him.
Hell yes.
Woo!
The descent from Wind River Peak was uneventful talus and tundra hopping. We chatted while we let the talus take us, only to discover it had taken us quite a bit off route.
We accidentally went way off route, but we have found our way back, and hopefully it didn't add a ton of time. Maybe just like kind of went like a little bit of a different way, and we've got a big day today, so hopefully that really didn't screw us. We'll see, I guess. And we're trying to make it to Golden Lakes Basin and then Douglas Peak Pass today.
The walking to Golden Lakes Basin was actually quite pleasant. We crossed lots of flattish tundra, only interrupted by the occasional rock hop. We followed a beautiful drainage into the basin where we got to join a trail that skirted the lakes. We stopped for lunch to re-up on calories before our climb to Douglas Peak Pass and dried out all of our gear, which had gotten covered in condensation the night before. We followed a sometimes overgrown use trail to the next hanging valley below Douglas Peak Pass.
Ow. That is the route we're going up. We're supposed to follow these cliffs up to that pass.
We made our way around the lakeside cliffs that guarded the base of the pass and onto the narrow strip of vegetation that clings to the east wall of the approach. The cliffs reminded me of going to the offsets in Missouri as a kid, an old flooded quarry that has since been shut down because too many people died jumping from the cliffs. As usual, once we got there, it was not as bad as it looked from across the lake. I've not yet gotten over how most of the features on this route are not something I would have ever looked at as an actual route, though. They are mostly the backdrop to beautiful alpine lakes that I would have previously considered the final destination, not a stop along the way. The higher we got, the less vegetation we had and the more loose rock. Luckily, for most of it, we still had the staple east wall. At the top, we crossed a final patch of loose gravel and got our first glimpse of Alpine Lakes Basin.
Holy shit.
It was about 5:30 p.m. and we still had the descent and lots of rock hopping to go. The first part of the descent was loose gravel, our least favorite, which eventually gave way to loose talus, our second least favorite, and finally, a little bit of snow, arguably our collective third least favorite.
That to the left is the pass that we just came down, and you might be thinking to yourself, what pass? Because it doesn't look like one.
Our goal was to camp at the fourth and northernmost lake in the basin. We rock hopped and rock hopped and rock hopped and rock hopped, interrupted only briefly by small patches of snow. We realized that we were losing daylight and it might be in our best interest to find camp early. Luckily, there were some sites on exposed kettles at the third lake, which we were able to scope out as the sun was setting. Cowboy camping at this point made the most sense, and since we'd been blessed with perfect weather, that's what we did. The stars here were among the best I've ever seen. The entire Milky Way was visible, and I fell asleep to shooting star after shooting star. Day 6. We decided to continue our theme of maximizing daylight by trying to start our day shortly after sunrise. We had to climb up the fourth lake on tundra and talus before skirting it, and multiple lakeside cliffs. The lakeside cliffs, like so many of the other seemingly innocuous waypoints mentioned in the guidebook for this route, were more of an undertaking than we'd considered. We opted for some Class 3 sections rather than gaining and losing more elevation. Again, a decision that only a week ago I probably wouldn't have made. Eventually, after traversing more talus and straddling the terminal moraine of an unnamed glacier, we were ascending Alpine Lakes Pass. It was a toil up talus and snowfields, and I was grateful for short breaks from the rocks and the soft snow.
This is the view from the top of Alpine Lakes Pass. Looking back at everything we just came from. Whew.
On the other side, we descended into the North Fork Valley, one of the most fantastic sections of the route. We descended more talus and snow before fording a milky blue glacial creek. Lunch was calling, and we couldn't help but stop after sitting down to put on dry socks. For me, the exhaustion of the last few days was reaching its peak. Plus, I was pretty sure I had not packed enough calories. My watch was telling me I was burning upwards of 3,000 each day, and I'd probably packed around 2,800. Between that and the 3 p.m. bonks I was feeling every day, I knew that I probably wasn't eating enough, and I started to break into my last day of food. We worked our way toward Blau Rock Pass through stunning scenery, and I contemplated whether I had enough fortitude for the final climb of the day. I ate more snacks and hoped between that and a little bit of extra caffeine, I'd make it through. We skirted glacial floodplains to the base of Blau Rock. I'd never seen anything like it, and I can't wait to come back someday to spend more time just staring. The climb up Blau Rock was a grind, first up steep tundra and then up more talus and snow. To our relief, as we approached, we realized we'd misjudged which pass was Blau Rock. We were relieved to find out it was to our right and not to our left, because the pass to the left looked to be covered in very steep snow. Once we got above the snow on Blau Rock, it was just loose rock and some sections with a use trail. It was a long but mostly straightforward climb, and I felt like I was finally starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel on this route. I should have known I was getting ahead of myself. At the top, the descent was very loose and very steep. Hence, no videos were taken. We crossed some more snow, which I always welcome over rock, and descended more large talus. Once we reached tundra, we decided to call it a day. We were losing daylight and wanted to be well rested for day 7, which we knew would be one of our longest yet. Day 7. The final section of the Wind River High Route is even more exposed than the rest, staying above 11,000 feet for over 18 miles. Plus, we had gotten a forecast for Goat Flats, our destination for night 7, and realized storms were coming early on the morning of day 8. We figured we should cover more ground than we originally planned in order to get off the exposed areas before lightning became an issue and, quite frankly, a threat to our lives. The day started with a descent to Dinwiddie Creek, followed by endless talus hopping. It took us almost 3 hours to reach West Sentinel Pass and long snowfields, which did provide some relief. The snowfields led us to the most exciting portion of this section, the glaciers. Glacial travel was mostly a novelty for both of us, and we enjoyed what felt like easy walking compared to most of the route so far. Turns out, after days of talus hopping, microspikes and relatively flat glacial ice feels like easy travel.
What?
Leslie spotted possibly one of the coolest backcountry finds ever, a bighorn sheep skull entrenched in the glacial ice.
That's so cool.
We wondered how long it had been there and what fate befell it. It was an eerie but impressive reminder of the brutality of the terrain we were traversing. Even though the rest of the day's most notable points were glaciers, the gullies and saddles in between felt like challenges similar to the passes we had gotten used to on this route. When we weren't on glacial ice, we were traveling through loose moraine, and we even witnessed some pretty serious rockfall.
We came down that gully in the distance there. Wow.
As clouds rolled in, we continued to check the weather to make sure storms were still just tomorrow's problem. We knew we'd be exposed for the rest of the day, with the final 13er of the route being our evening's primary feature. Luckily, the forecasts continued to maintain 0% chance of storms until the next morning. We slogged across glaciers and endless snowfields.
Literally never ending. It's looked like this for like 30 minutes now. Oh my God.
There were moments where I felt like I was on a repeating treadmill of endless snow. There was nothing to look at but snow and sky. And no matter how long I kept walking, it kept looking the same. Of course, though, it did eventually come to an end, and endless snow was replaced once again with endless rock. We saw a bighorn sheep family in the distance and descended some very steep granite slabs shortly before we finally stopped for lunch. Our knees desperately needed a break, and our bodies desperately needed calories. We stopped just before Iceberg Lake Pass, which we were more ready to climb with full bellies. The pattern of endless snow and rock fields continued after the pass as we made our way to Downs Mountain. Normally, I welcome soft snow over hard snow, but after days of loose rock, talus, and uneven tundra, I craved more stability. Sliding around on the snow felt like it was testing every last capacity of my exhausted muscles. Finally, we made it to more rock, and for once, I welcomed the sight. It was flat, and hopping went easy for a while. We knew the final mile up Downs Mountain would be nothing but more talus hopping. The thought of it being the last high point on the route, combined with dwindling daylight, kept us moving forward.
I am at the summit of Wind River Peak, which is the last 13er of the Wind River High Route. So it's pretty much all downhill from here. It's about 7 p.m., maybe later, and we're going to try and get 6.5 miles done tonight because we're doing all that behind me. It's all exposed, and it's supposed to thunderstorm first thing in the morning, and honestly, it doesn't look great right now. But I'm pretty stoked.
Signed the summit log. It's a cute little jar.
Not exactly what I want to see in snow. Going over that way. The largest, longest, and steepest snowfield yet was waiting for us on the descent. I opted to take it over the rocks on the edges because I figured it would be faster, and we were definitely short on time. Leslie is less comfortable in snow, and this was definitely our steepest field yet. But they were a trooper, and we reached the base of it just as we were losing all daylight. This meant crossing No Man's Pass in complete darkness. Despite attempting to stay very on top of our navigation, we frequently found our headlamps pointing into the abyss of the steep drop-offs on the north and south sides of the pass. At 10 p.m., we finally stopped for dinner. If we were going to keep hiking into the night in order to beat early thunderstorms, we'd need calories. We managed 2.5 more miles after dinner on extremely tedious terrain. Right as Leslie's headlamp died, the heavens, or the halo of my headlamp, opened up and revealed a patch of flat tundra, perfectly sized to fit an Elise and Leslie-sized cowboy camping nest. Day 8. We woke up at 5 to cloudy skies and a few more miles of off-trail travel between us and the 7.5 miles of trail to the end.
It's Wind River High Route Day 8, and we are finishing up our very last off-trail portion. I am so ready to be on a trail and then in my car.
Traversing goat flats in the daylight proved to be much easier than at night, although still quite tedious, and we marveled at the fact that we'd done it for so long in the dark. When we finally reached the final section of trail, I felt relieved. We'd made it before storms, and the rest of this route would be smooth sailing. The final miles were easy, but did seem to drag on. The heat and anticipation of reaching the car got to me, but Leslie and I distracted each other with conversation and spontaneous utterings of, "Oh my God, we actually did it." I reflected on the past 7 days and how much they broke me down, and ultimately it built me back up. I feel simultaneously more humbled by the mountains and more capable and confident in my abilities to move through them than I ever have before. There is no conquering of something as incredible as the Wind River High Route, only a serendipitous combination of luck, preparation, and fantastic partnership. Upon returning to my car, I am elated to be finished and already thinking about the next adventure. I will certainly be back to the Wind River Range.
Look at that. Would you just look at it? Oh, gorgeous.
I was looking back at like the video of you climbing into the thimbleberry bush.
When your other friend is doing the Wind River High Route and it just a week later and you don't get to run into each other at the trailhead, but she left me a note. How cute. I'm gonna go leave one for her now.